No, nothing but weight in Rochester, except snow.
So we've had Christina be absent last.
Oh, so there's been a decision to have
I'd like to call to order this City of Sonoma Special Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, July 25th, 2019. And with that, I'll ask Wendy for a call to order, please.
Yes, Commissioner Kelso-Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill. Here. Commissioner Willender.
Here.
Commissioner Bohar.
Here.
Commissioner McDonald.
Here.
Commissioner Larry Barnett.
Here.
And Chair Felder.
Here. And with that, I'll ask Commissioner Larry Barnett to lead us in the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of items. If anyone has a cell phone or other device that might make noise, I'd ask you to put it in silent mode, please. And any decision that's reached by the Planning Commission tonight may be appealed to the City Council if it's filed within, excuse me, 15 days following our decision. And with that, we only have one item on the agenda, so I assume there's no changes to the agenda. Late correspondence, Wendy.
Yes, regarding item number 5.1, we have a letter from, or an email from John Kelly, Gianna Kelly, Rachel Peterson, Susie Gallo, Joanna Rosales, Lauren Kottner, Sharon Mustet Hartford, Deborah Bethany, Ann Appleman, and AJ Rabili, Whitney Kennett, and 2 emails from David Eicher.
Thank you. And before we continue, just to let the audience know, because this is a special meeting, there was no public comment on items not appearing on tonight's agenda. So the agenda item, you will have an opportunity for public comment during the agenda item itself. With that, we're going to move into the public hearing. So the only item we have is 5.1, which is a discussion and possible action to approve a use permit, sign review, and a design review for a restaurant, Sausage Emporium, located at 31 East Napa Street. It's categorically exempt pursuant to section 15303 of the CEQA guidelines, which are the conversion of existing small structures from one use to another. And with that, I will ask Wendy to give us a staff report, please.
Thank you. So I'm the staff member present this evening. I would like to let you all know that David Storer is available on the phone. David, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, this is David. Hi, guys.
Yeah, so hopefully we can get through the meeting and not have to bother David, but if we do need his attention, he's right here. So this item was originally scheduled to be heard by the Planning Commission at the July 11th meeting, and this item was continued due to staff error. There are three entitlements that this commission will be looking at this evening, as Chair Felder mentioned. A use permit, sign review, and design review for the Sausage Emporium. The project is located just south of the plaza, and it is in the same building as Pangloss Cellars. The building itself is a 7,400 square foot building, and the subject tenant space is 1,200 square feet. The project is zoned commercial. It's located in the historic overlay zone and the downtown district. Restaurants are an allowed use in the commercial zoning district with a use permit. Back in 2015, the Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission approved the design review for the Pangloss Cellars tenant space. A historic resource evaluation and an addendum to the historic resource evaluation were prepared for the building, which found that the building had lost enough integrity to render it no longer historically significant under the criteria of the California Register of Historic Places. And just last month, the Design Review Commission recommended that the Planning Commission approve the sign application and the design review application for the restaurant, including the recommendation that the Sausage Emporium sign and Cafe Marketplace bar signs be combined into one sign. And this recommended modification is reflected in the revised drawings in the packet. With regard to the use permit, the restaurant is going to feature organic coffee, gourmet sausages, and local wine and beer. They're proposing to serve breakfast and lunch daily with light dinners on the weekends. A use permit is required for a restaurant and the Type 41 liquor license. The restaurant will be staffed with 5 full-time employees, including the 2 owner-operators, and seating will consist of 20 inside seats, and no outdoor seating is proposed. Hours of operation open to the public are 8:30 a.m. To 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and 8:30 to 10 p.m. Friday through Sunday. 1 on-site parking space is provided, and the tenant space is grandfathered in at a retail parking ratio of 1 space for each 300 square feet, and this amounts to a parking credit of 4 spaces. For restaurants, the development code requires 1 parking space for each 4 seats, and based on the number of seats, which is 20, the restaurant has a total parking requirement of 5 spaces, which is provided in the form of 1 on-site parking space and the 4 grandfathered parking spaces. With regard to the sign review and sign item number 1, the Sausage Emporium Cafe Marketplace bar sign is one-sided. It's just over 24 square feet in area. It would consist of black aluminum lettering. It would attach to the building using rear stud mounts, and illumination is not proposed. Sign item number 4 is a vertical sign. It's 3 square feet in area. It would consist of 6 separate black panels. It would also be attached to the building using fabricated rear stud mounts, and illumination is not proposed. The sign ordinance allows businesses to have a certain amount of sign area based on the primary frontage of buildings. And in this case, the aggregate sign area allowed for the parcel is just over 68 square feet. And the total aggregate sign area for the property would be just over 35 square feet. And this is including the existing wall sign for Pan Glass and the proposed wall signs for the Sausage Emporium. So the proposal is consistent with this requirement. The sign ordinance also says that each business is allowed 2 signs, and the proposal before you is consistent with that requirement. So there are certain basic findings that this commission will need to approve or to make in order to approve an application for signs. With regard to design review, a new Panda folding window is proposed in this area. A new Arcadia entrance door and storefront windows is proposed. A new burgundy painted aluminum dimensional crown logo is proposed above the Sausage Emporium sign on the window. And the body of the tenant space will be painted Benjamin Moore Monterey white, and the trim is proposed to be painted Benjamin Moore mopboard black. Again, there are certain findings that this commission will need to make in order to approve an application for design review. I would make one change to the conditions of approval. Condition of approval number 2 had the wrong type of license required by the California Department of ABC, and it should be a type 41, and we can make that change in the conditions of approval. And staff recommends this commission approve the resolution for a use permit, sign application, and design review of a restaurant, subject to findings and the revised conditions of approval. That concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Questions of staff? Larry?
Wendy, I'm a little confused by something, which has to do with one of the signs. It's the larger one that's on the outside. So I've gone through the various renderings in the packet, and it hasn't solved my confusion. So is the lettering that says Sausage Emporium and the marketplace, other language that's on it, is that all going to be contained on the marquee, in the front of the marquee?
Yes, the sign will say Sausage Emporium Cafe, Marketplace and Bar.
Okay, so it's not going to extend as lettering above the marquee, because in one of these renderings it's confusing. It doesn't. And you showed one rendering in your material that we don't have in our packet, which showed the lettering contained on the marquee, but I don't see anything like that in the packet I'm looking at. So just to say that, so just so I understand that we're talking about the same thing, there's going to be a crown applied to the windows above the marquee, which is a separate element from the lettering. I'm assuming it's not part of that same quote-unquote sign. It's a separate piece. And then the lettering is all going to be contained within the height of the existing marquee. Is that correct?
Well, let me get that up in front of us so we're all talking about the same issue here. Just take me one moment.
So you say. One moment.
Here we go. Oh, I had it up here already. Gosh darn it. All this new technology. I think I'm doing pretty good.
Take your time. We have nothing else to do tonight.
Right.
Page 34.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so keep going. So there's what I see in our packet, which does not have the lettering on the marquee.
Right. And
So
this is
what is it that's actually been proposed?
This is what the applicant is proposing.
This with the
yes.
lettering extending above the marquee?
Yes.
Similar to Sweet Scoops, like how Sweet Scoops has theirs in relief, like
that goes up above and below their external.
Well, we'll give you a chance to speak up at the microphone.
Okay, so because there was another illustration in the materials you went through that had everything within the marquee.
Right, and I apologize for that. I put the wrong diagram in my presentation.
Okay, well, there you go. That's why I was confused. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So Wendy, what we're looking, that is the complete signage picture that we're looking at. There was no, I thought there were two choices when I saw the thing fly by, but that's it right there. That's complete, right?
Right, 2 signs, the Sausage Emporium Cafe Marketplace and Bar, and then the breakfast, coffee, lunch, local wine, champagne sign.
So the lettering in Sausage Emporium, those are distinct block letters that's not a sign painted, those are letters up
That's
on
right.
some kind of a rigid matrix or something, huh?
Yes,
So the background shows through the spaces between the letters, in other words.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Seeing none, we'll
Oh,
take it.
I did have one question. It has to do more with the conditions of approval. The applicant stated the hours of operation and when they would be operating breakfast, lunch, and dinners. And is it typical that conditions that set the hours for a particular business be included, or is that something that I just, you know, if we were to approve a use permit, I would imagine we'd be approving hours of operation.
Sure, so the conditions of approval state that the restaurant shall operate in conformance with the project narrative, and the hours of operation were listed in the project narrative, but if you'd like to include them as an added condition of approval under item number 1, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any other? Would the applicant care then to address us? We'll open up the public hearing. You may step to the microphone. Please state your name and
Thank you. I didn't mean to speak out loud. I thought you were asking me a question. I apologize.
Bring the microphone a little closer. There you go.
Is this okay? Good evening, Commissioners. I'm grateful to have you gather for this special meeting to hear my application to move the Sausage Emporium to 31 East Napa Street. Thanks to Wendy and your office for facilitating this. I appreciate you, and I thank you all for coming. Tonight, I humbly request for action to approve a use permit, the sign review for a restaurant, as well as the design review. I feel our application is an example on how our historic plaza can be an incubator for a local concept to thrive and grow. My family and I are excited for an opportunity to have a premier position and to bring great food, a warm welcome, and memories made for locals and tourists alike. Our proposed cafe, as well as its proposed signage, are totally consistent with the patterns of use surrounding the plaza. We are already a part of the fabric of our downtown. We are already your neighbors and friends. Our concept blends into Sonoma, and you can count on me personally to do everything with the pride of a real Sonoman going forward, with only the best for this place we all call home in mind with every step. The parking requirements are already addressed through the grandfathered-in parking allowance afforded all buildings facing the plaza. Thank you to whomever decided that long ago. The project design received unanimous approval and praise by the city's Sonoma Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission. I believe our suggestions are tasteful and will simply freshen a building that has had many changes made starting in 1902, again in 1938, and again in 1972. Even then, our town and buildings were evolving with the times, albeit in our own Sonoma way. Our businesses are growing and changing even then, and our town was host to many exciting incarnations, all at this very location, 31 East Napa Street, previously known as Lot 52 on the old El Pueblo map. It was one of the first lots to be developed and continually occupied since the 1840s. Originally a saloon, and then later cleared for a stone structure. This spot has been a luxury department store and milliners, selling dry goods and having a cash-only operation. The building has had many faces and many stories, and I can't wait to be one of them. As a result of the many years this building has served Sonoma and the many changes it has endured, it has lost enough integrity to which it is no longer historically significant under the California Register of Historic Places. For those who may attempt to argue this point, I know there was some late mail submitted refuting this, An expert was hired by the name of Alice P. Duffy, an architecture historian and historic planner, and was made exempt in 2015. It notes specifically that qualifying historical features are no longer present. Our restaurant will operate in conformance with the project narrative, enjoy 20 seats, and a Type 41 license with the ABC. I intend to comply with the police and fire department. We will be designed in conformance with the California State Building Code as well as the Chapter 12.14 of the Municipal Code. PRMD, the SCWA, Environmental Health, as well as the Sonoma Unified School District will all be contacted and all necessary permits will be conformed to. I wholeheartedly thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight and allow my project to move on swiftly. Time is of the essence, as you all know, for a project like mine and others. And I thank you so much for hearing me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant before we open it to the public? Go ahead.
Welcome.
Thank
We're
you.
glad to have you here tonight. I do wonder if you want to limit yourself to those hours, or if there would be a opportunity to expand those hours in case your business should ever warrant opening earlier or staying open a little later.
I would appreciate any language that can be flexible in order to not revisit an entire application again, remain flexible in regards to hours, how I use my 20 seats, etc.
Related to the seats, is there a thought at all about an outdoor table?
Sure, but I'm not asking for any of that at this time. I understand there's a separate application that can be prepared to address that.
Looking at the front of the space, the building, there is a vertical, architecturally vertical element that separates your space from the Pangloss portion of the building. To whom does that vertical element belong? To which building? Is that part of the Pangloss building or portion, or is it part of your portion?
I believe it's part of our portion. Wendy, can you help me on that?
It's there.
Are you talking about this?
Yes.
So it
It's
looks
their
to
portion.
be painted as though it belongs to us.
Yes.
That's the best I can answer that. Unfortunately, structurally, I have no idea, but it does share the same
Okay.
AP number as Pangloss.
And do I recall correctly that you're proposing to change the paint color on the face of it?
Yes, that's correct.
And so are the vertical columns to the right and left and going to be the same color as the rest of the face of it?
They would be included in our new paint application, yes.
And were those in review by the Design Review Commission? Did they review that color as juxtaposed against the Pangloss building?
I think when we decided on the color to propose, we were trying to stand out and freshen up. And I suppose any contrast would do just that. So that was part of our thinking, yes.
And the color you're proposing is a white, if I recall.
It's a light, it's a creamy white, Monterey white by Benjamin Moore.
And the Pangloss, I think, is kind of a beige.
It's got a taupe kind of a color.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah, it's darker.
Right, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
This probably isn't completely relevant, but will you no longer be using the Hare and Hatter?
We actually are, it's a great observation, we are dropping it. It's become just too much of a mumble, and it doesn't say who we've become,
Right.
which is the Sausage Emporium.
Right.
It was hangover from the coffee shop I used to own, and it was more sentimental than anything else. So now we're just streamlining it for brand consistency.
Great,
Thanks.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, it's totally irrelevant to the application, but I'm just curious about the crown. What's the significance?
It's a little bit of a play on the sort of old-fashioned word emporium and what that kind of manifests in people. You know, it's an artisan product that we're highlighting right now. That's sort of the latest thing. Sausage, craft beer, even fermentation products like pickles, all things that we feature and pride ourselves on. And I did live in England for a really long time, and it was just a playful way to sort of create good imagery that was positive. Also, we have a wine and sausage club that we've formed, and that's called the Society. Also has a different crown. So we're just kind of weaving together our brands for some brand consistency and recognizable. It's playful, we think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And regarding the crown element of this portion of the
Yes,
sign,
yeah.
is that going to be, once again, a relief piece? In other words, it's going to be what we see here as solid color is going to be solid material, and what we see as white is going to be nothing?
It's in relief, the same as the lettering, and it's cut out to allow the behind through.
Yes,
Yes.
that's my question. Thanks.
Okay, I think that does it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll open this up to the rest of the public. If you have any comments on the application, I would ask anyone, if you care to speak, to come to the microphone. Please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. And you're on, David.
Hi, David Eicher, E-I-C-H-A-R, and I'm glad Commissioner O'Neill brought up the hours of operation because my wife and I often go to Sebastiani Theater and want to eat dinner afterwards, and places that close up at 9 can't get there. So hopefully you can expand that out for if they want to open up later to the rest of the week. I'm all for that. And you know, I think this is great that they're doing this. My major concern in looking at this, I'm glad you brought up this photo again, is that the signage is bigger here, if you look at that, than the Chico's, and I did some measurement. So most of the letting, the Sausage Emporium, is about twice the size of the Chico's. And the E, the big E, is about twice the size of Pangloss Cellars. And even the smaller letters are bigger than the Pangloss Cellars. So it just seems to be a little big, and I would like to see all that fit on the marquee and then have the crown above it in there, if that's possible. In the conditions of approval, and now I'm just trying to make sure we dot the I's and cross the T's because, you know, and in this specific case, because we've seen something in terms of number of seats. Now, 15 years later, we're wondering, what do we have number of seats? And I don't want to see this happen again. So I think in the conditions of approval, just saying 20 seats, specify 20 indoor seats and no outdoor seats to make it clear. Unless you want something different, then specify 20 seats, indoor and outdoor combination, or of something of that nature. But I think that needs to be more specific, just because we've seen problems with that. Now, I understand there's some controversy on whether this is a historic building, and I think even if it were deemed historic, then you would not be able to use a category exemption unless there was a substantial adverse change to that historic resource. And I don't see this being a substantial adverse change, other than maybe the sign, but I'm not an expert on that to tell you that or not. So I think if you have to do an additional finding so that to say, no, this does not make a substantial adverse change, I would do that so that you can use a category exemption. Because you cannot use a categorical exemption if, on a historic resource, the project would have a substantial adverse effect on that. So, and I think, because overall, I think we might be using category exemptions a little too much, and I've kind of seen that we've changed in some areas from the whether or not we are an urbanized area, and I guess now we realize we're not now. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else?
Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street in the beautiful city of Sonoma. I'm completely supportive of this project. This is an excellent business, as the presenter said, locally owned, and I trust that you will pass this. Thank you so much. And don't forget City Party next week.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Kathy Kennett. I live at 725 Denmark Street here in the beautiful town of Sonoma. I've been here 38 years. I've known this family. Miranda has grown up with my eldest daughter, who's no longer with us, but everything they do is a first-class operation. They care a lot about people and this town. And I feel that this can only enhance our beautiful space here. We need another space in town. If you see the people on the weekends for breakfast, if you see the line outside the Sunflower Cafe, it's like daunting at times, you know. As a local, you can't even get in there. But I think this will be a tremendous asset for us, and those are just my 2 cents. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Deely, 579 Davidson in Sonoma, and I'm just here to support this project. I've been a friend of the Welch family for 40 years, and I'm so proud of you for growing from a hot dog stand in Friedman's to the Hare and Hatter into what they're going to become. I also know them as a vendor. I work for Fishman Supply in Petaluma, and they're a customer of mine. And all of my dealings with them have been as an exceptional company. They pay their bills on time. They do everything by the book. And I'm very excited for Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one approach, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion and possible action.
Are we going to be dealing with it? Are we dealing all 3 items at once? Or are we breaking them out separately? Use permits, signage, and design?
However you would like to proceed, but I think we could possibly deal with them all together.
I have a quick question for Wendy. Miranda said that there's a separate application for possibly outdoor seating. What does that involve?
It's an outdoor seating application, and you can apply for outdoor seating up to 25% of the indoor seating, and that can be approved administratively.
Okay, so if we approve tonight, the application I think calls for 20 seats. A seat outdoors that had 4 seats could just be approved with you. She wouldn't have to come back.
No.
Okay.
Larry.
The issue, Wendy, has been raised about the letter height and letter size. Are there standards other than the size of a total sign? Are there any standards that pertain to letter heights themselves?
No, it's just the maximum area of a wall sign.
Thank you.
Okay, well, anyone like to start off the discussion?
Yeah, I will. Well, first of all, say that I am in support of the project and the application. And one suggestion I might make, and it's merely a suggestion, is the use of the word bar on your sign. I think it's a bit misleading. I think there's going to be people who may think you're a full-fledged bar. Now, that may not be bad for you. Somebody walks in wanting a gin and tonic to discover they can only get beer, wine, and champagne. They may not walk out. On the other hand, it may draw a different crowd than you expect. I'm just putting it out there as an idea. You know, using the word drinks might capture the same flavor, so to speak, but not put you in the same category as Steiner's. And bar to me means bar, you know, smoky booze, loud and wacky. So other than that, I do think your signage is pushing it, but I'm interested to see how it works. I'm not entirely certain And as I say, without a model in front of me, it'll be hard to tell. I'm not exactly certain if it's going to be more readable or less readable as letters extended above the marquee. What color is the lettering going to be of the sign? Black. Okay, well, if you've got windows behind it that without illumination are going to be black, because, you know, I don't know what's going on behind the glass. It's actually possible, I think, as it is in this illustration I've got, for the top half of those words to kind of fade out a little bit and disappear. And so I'm not sure if black's the best choice if you're going to be up against dark windows. It's a challenge visually because you don't want your signage to get lost or confusing and be difficult to read. By the same token, you don't want it to be so in your face that it's, you know, unseemly. I'm speaking as a graphic designer, which I did for many years, and I think it's a design challenge whenever you go out beyond the edges of your canvas, which is what you're doing. You're going off the canvas here, and so you've got the background
Barnett,
you're working
if I
with.
may interrupt, there's an example over at Sweet Scoops of how that might.
Yeah. And
I think
of course, in Sweet Scoop's example, they've got a contrasting color, which is the rose stone tile of the building behind it. It's not dark, so the dark letters of the sign stand out. I'm not so sure you'll enjoy the same effect with windows, which will have two effects. Number one, depending on the light, you may get reflection on the front of the windows that'll be kind of bright, and I don't know how that's going to affect the sense of the letters suspended in front. And at different hours, the windows will be dark, so it's an interesting challenge.
Anyone else want to join in?
I guess,
This is a minor question, but those windows behind the signage, are those open to the below space? Will sunlight come in there?
There is
If you could approach the microphone, because this is recorded, so.
apologies.
Excuse me.
So beyond the higher windows is an internal drop ceiling that covers the area over the current front door and window to create the past merchandising area for the retail that was there. And so it's actually, the light shines through from the very top, but just below it is a drop ceiling about standard height, where the rest of the unit beyond is much higher from the top of the windows.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I follow.
I'm not
the dimensions,
articulating
but
properly.
The light does not come through to the bottom? Is that what you're saying?
It comes through in general, but not to the bottom because of the ceiling that exists just below it and extended back about 6 to 8 feet.
So are those windows painted or occluded with something?
I don't believe so. I believe they're clear. And we will, we do need them, and I take your point, because there's no other windows in the entire place, so that light is important to us. But we're not going to be doing any real construction, so the drop ceiling will remain, and we'll have what light we have.
Okay. Another minor question.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like some of the lettering on the glass door is redundant to what's above it. Doesn't it repeat Cafe Marketplace Bar on the door?
It does.
Is that important to have that?
I think so, just because people walking by don't necessarily see the sign from the top. So yes, I believe it's important.
I won't comment on the word bar. I'll leave that to you.
Okay.
Regarding the hours,
Sure.
I thought riding on Commissioner O'Neill's comment, Wendy, it seems to me that having it open in the evening, if you decide to do that, would be an advantage to the public, in my opinion.
Yes.
And how difficult is it to change that later on? Is that an administrative permit as well to change the hours?
No, that would be a use permit modification that would come back before this planning commission.
Well, would it be agreeable if we could just handle that right now?
Sure.
And then you can set whatever hours you want within that parameter.
That's great.
That seems like a better idea.
I agree.
Anything like that, I'm in favor of. Thank you for suggesting
Yeah, I can imagine it being very pleasant at 10 o'clock, when everything's closed. It's a good idea. So are there any thoughts that the staff would have about a closing time? Is there anything wrong with having it 11 o'clock or something like that?
Well, bars are open till 2, right?
Huh?
Bars
Yeah,
are
sure.
open till 2, so.
Fine, make it 2.
That was it.
I will not be open until 2.
Well,
It was a
you
joke.
can do whatever you like then.
Well, along those lines, and this just may be a matter of my of being out of practice on these use permit issues, is it possible to establish a maximum range of hours within which she can operate, which do not require her to stay open till
absolutely.
10 o'clock?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
Other discussion? Discussion.
Okay, so I'll go. Okay, well, first, I wanted to thank you for bringing to our plaza in our city another place to have breakfast and lunch. I think there's almost a monopoly, so to speak, on the plaza, and I live 2 blocks from the plaza. I have friends that come and stay, my family, and there's no place to ever go. We have to actually get in a car and drive down Highway 12 to have breakfast, which seems ludicrous. So the other thing is you're offering a more affordable venue for some of us that live here that can't afford to spend $35 for an omelet. So I really appreciate that. And I'm wholeheartedly supportive of this application and a family-owned business on the plaza. I don't have a problem with the use permit for the restaurant and the marketplace or the bar. I do have a concern about the signage, though. I think it's for the size and the proportion of the building and the fact that there are transom windows. I think and I feel that the size of the word Sausage Emporium extending above and over the transom is a little bit distracting, and I agree with Commissioners Barnett that it may not be visible. We looked at another business on the plaza which has lowered the majority of the signage, and some of it does pop up above the marquee. And I'm almost thinking that maybe for it to really read, you might consider making the signage smaller and having it fit within the confines of the marquee, and maybe making cafe, marketplace, and bar a little bit smaller. I just think that it doesn't really, proportionally, it may not read correctly. And I'm assuming that the letters are individual, they're not on a mesh background, so they would be individually cut. So I'm glad that you nodded yes. So that's a good thing. It's not illuminated, it's tasteful, it's not inconsistent with what we see on the plaza. It's just, I think it's a little bit larger and a little bit out of scale with the height and the size of the building. The crown, I think, is a really a unique logo, and I like it, and I wouldn't change the size of that at all. In terms of the hours of operation, I would agree with some of the comments from the commissioners that we'd like to extend it, but keep in mind, and I don't want to sound negative, but this is a use permit that runs with the land. It doesn't run with the owner, and maybe 10 years from now there might be an opportunity for the current owner to do something completely different, but yet we still would be locked in with the use permit and hours. We may not necessarily, if there was a change in ownership, we may not want that particular restaurant or bar to operate till 2 a.m. I'm just throwing that out in the universe. So you have to keep in mind that once we approve this use permit on this property for a restaurant and bar, and we establish hours, that runs with the land in perpetuity until there's a substantial change in use. So I wanted the commission to know that. And so to say let's let it stay open until 2, that might be good idea, but just letting you know then that's the hours that any operator could use in the future.
Well,
So
let me just float an idea for the commission that since they've suggested hours on the weekends that would include the dinner hour, I would say a nice option would be just to make it apply all 7 days.
yes,
And that covers them 8:30 till 10.
yeah.
Can I just interject
Oh, yeah.
real quick and ask Wendy or perhaps David? Don't we have the ability to condition a condition of approval that will expire upon transfer of ownership?
No, not for a use permit.
I thought that like in a condition of approval, we could say it goes till, I don't know, a certain time that that we could put in a transfer of ownership would.
You could do a reconsideration after a year, but I don't know of a provision that you could prohibit a use permit from going with the land.
Not the use, but like a condition of approval. I feel like
I think
hours.
what I'm hearing is that as long as it would stay as a restaurant use, and there wouldn't be any other intensification, that you would have to allow whatever we condition.
No, I know. I've seen other use permits that have like provisions like that conditioned by a transfer of ownership. Not the use, but like something as simple as like hours of operation. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I don't believe that is possible.
Yeah, my inner old planner brain, always has assumed that once a use permit is approved, and as long as the use doesn't change, it runs with the land and irrespective
all
of the
provisions.
owners.
Okay.
So, but anyway, I just wanted to throw that out. I don't have a problem with the seating. I actually wish there was more seating. So I would encourage you to try to put something out on the sidewalk. I think that would be wonderful. It would be wonderful if you could have more seating there inside. So I don't know, maybe convert the trash area over to some more seats or something. I don't know. But anyway, I'm really excited about this business, and I hope we have more discussion about the signage. I just think that once it goes up, it may look a little bit out of proportion with the linear frontage of the building and the transom itself. So those are my comments.
So I think we all love this business, and we're really excited about it. You're not a tasting room. You're not a cannabis dispensary. You are something we're all excited about, and this is locals, but I think that visitors will really like it as well. I'm so excited to have gourmet coffee on the plaza. When my family comes to visit, there's no place to go. So that's fabulous. So I'd like to make that a condition of use permit. Thank you also for this great application and presentation. I think you put a lot of work into it. You have the right architects. You've got people that are really skilled at what they're doing. I do want to see the hours extended. I'd like it to go from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. I'm thinking, because you might find that you're so busy in the morning and 8:30 is a little late for breakfast for those of us who are working. I don't know that you want to work those hours, but I'd like you to have that flexibility that if you have the option. I like the outdoor seats. I think that would also attract people and see what's there and draw people in. So I like the idea of adding that. If that's done administratively, that's fine, but if it's something we need to deal with today, I'd like to include that. Tosca, how late do they stay open?
I'm thinking off the top of my head 11, but I'm not
So, yeah, and that's
Yeah,
like
it's
one of the
around
few
there,
places that
every
we can
night.
go to at night when we've gotten to a meeting or whatever. So, again, not locking you into working those hours, but keeping that option open, that we might want to consider that. When it gets to the sign, I think it's a little challenging because you're going to be looking at the sign from like 5 feet, or if you're taller than me, maybe 6 feet. And the view we're seeing is from straight on, so it's a little challenging, but I have to say that you have a top-level architect if you're working with your architect on that, I'm not a graphic artist. I'm not going to figure that piece out. But I do think that everything you've put together here was very well presented. I'm super excited about it. And I do want to expand the hours of operation and look at that outdoor seating. Okay.
With regard to the sign again, if this is being proposed as black lettering, is that what we're approving? In other words, if the applicant decided to alter the color of the lettering for readability, as an example, is that something that they have the option to do, or are we locking them in tonight to the color of their lettering? Wendy?
You're locking them into the color of their lettering.
Wow.
When I go out to do an inspection, I'm going to make sure that what they're proposing matches what was presented to this commission.
Okay.
We have an example of a pink door that it could always come back, you know.
Yes, well, we don't want anyone to have to come back.
The planning commission could
can we-
make that part of the condition that,
Can we add flexibility?
yeah, that
Yeah.
the color of the sign could be flexible, and you could give a list of options, or you could say you could have it any color.
I see. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I think it's great that this application's been proposed, and I think it's delightful to see that now that we've limited tasting rooms on the plaza, that other types of businesses are inclined to open up in the spaces that are available. I mean, this easily could have become another tasting room. So I'm completely supportive of the idea and ready to vote in favor when a motion is made.
Do we see a need to break out the three separate items? I think if we have a discussion and come to an understanding on, like the sign and stuff, that we could make a combined motion if that's suitable. Okay.
So just to address a couple technical things in the application that a member of the public brought up, I think the CEQA exemption is appropriate because Class 3 exemption allows, envision something like this, a restaurant under 2,500 square feet in a non-urbanized area, which we are. I believe it's only 1,250 square feet. So I think that is appropriate. I also think in terms of the historic significance of the building, I distinctly remember, and I'm glad that this is up on the screen right now, I was on the Design Review Commission back when Pangloss came forward, and Alice Duffy did do a historic report on that. The Pangloss, the original Pangloss application, I'm sure you remember, Wendy, literally looked like an Apple store, with this sort of modern wall of glass, and which would have been allowed because it wasn't historically significant, although we had the right to obviously provide input. And I remember there being a discussion about a dispute over the historic significance of the building back then, because the building, I believe, was originally built in the 1870s or 80s and was sort of rendered completely different in, I think, the early 1930s. I might be off. And so that's their view. And so then there was a dispute and a view that it's historic in their 1930s, right? The reason why I bring that all up is because the report was never changed. And so as of now, there is a report, obviously, which I think we need to go off of that says it's not historically significant. I just wanted for the record to say that and the reason why I'm bringing this up is just in the future, in case that ever becomes an issue, the record should show that there was some dispute over that. But more importantly, the application in front of us does not do anything, and just from my years of experience on the Historic Preservation Commission, does not do anything that significantly impacts the building if there was historic significance. And so that's why I'm okay with that CEQA exemption, and I just sort of wanted for the record that discussed. But more importantly, I think this is a great use of the site. This is a great business for the plaza. It's obviously currently existing, but expanding. This is exactly to a T the type of business that we always say we need more of on the plaza. And you should be very proud of what you do, and I know people are very excited to see it expand. You know, longtime local family, not a tasting room, not a chain. I mean, if you go down the list, this is exactly what we want. We should support that. And from what I understand, a donut shop, Harvey's Donuts, is moving, I think, into your old space in El Paseo. And so perhaps this is because tasting rooms are now limited and the market has changed and allowed these types of small local entrepreneurs to come back to their plaza. I couldn't be more excited and more happy with the direction things are going. So I'm very proud to support this project. I hope that the Bombay offering will continue. That's my favorite. And in terms of the signage, I will say that I think, and I don't know this for sure, but I just would want us to consider that we might be a little thrown off on how it looks because it's just a 2D printout. I seem to remember a similar discussion with Sweet Scoops, and when it's installed, it looks different. I think it's just hard to sort of portray that in the rendering. And in terms of the number of seats, it seems like I was looking at the site plan of the interior. It seems like it's pretty well filled with seats. I would obviously be supportive of an outdoor seat, but that's, you know, an administrative exemption or process. I would also support lengthening the hours, and then you can sort of pick and choose when you want to be open. But other than that, I'm very supportive of the project.
Can I bring up one point? I totally forgot about this because I was so excited about your application. But if you look at the screen above you, and this is all super nitpicky in my OCD, but I really think that the large E should actually be centered right directly below the crown in the center of the facade of the building. And I think maybe the rendering is off. If you take a look at the M and you take a look at the S and you look at how it relates to the windows, you may want to consider centering the E above the crown and then making the letters spaced so they're, you know what I'm saying?
It would be, this photograph is not parallel.
So I'm hoping that if we do approve this, it gives them some flexibility to like be a little bit more balanced. Yeah, so I would encourage you to have the E centered below the crown.
And I'm open to putting in our conditions any sort of flexibility that will allow you to, because at the end of the day, I mean, no one wants this business to look as good as you guys do, obviously. And so if there's some sort of flexibility that doesn't force them to have to come back and pass Wendy's inspections, I would be supportive of that.
Okay, you want to go?
Likewise, I'm overall very supportive of the project. I totally support the idea of more flexible hours. I think we could take a cue from a national chain, something called 7-Eleven. I think that would be a nice span that would give a little bit more flexible breakfast hours, which I support. I think the number of seats is appropriate. I'd love to see something outdoors because I think it tends to energize the sidewalk, and that just adds another element to the plaza. Regarding the signage, I actually overall support the signage with one exception, and it's just, maybe it's the way it's rendered, but the crown being applied to the transom lighting looks awkward. When you look at the adjacent two buildings in their transom, that lighting or that window glazing is pretty much unobstructed. I would just throw out for entertainment or consideration is the idea of not applying an applique of a crown against the light transom, because of the way it's divided up and it's quite clean, that maybe that crown could actually float away and be more associated with the actual sign. I just think that as is illustrated perfectly in this elevation, when you look at the store closing sale sign, it's applied, and it just, in my opinion, it just looks awkward. Beyond that, other than that comment about the crown, I heartily support the project.
That it? Well, I agree with the rest of the commission that this is a great project, and I'd love to see it go forward. So I hope we can get through a couple of these items to clean them up and just come up with a one motion that would satisfy the conditions that we want to see. So I think, first of all, on hours, is everybody pretty much in agreement that opening it up 7 days from 7 to 11 gives them enough space to operate within? It just gives them that flexibility, so we would add that to the conditions of approval. Hours would be permitted from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days. Okay. I think the only other, in terms of seating, I think I would like to leave the seating be the 20 spaces inside. That actually gives them more flexibility to come to you for, rather than us saying, could you do it in or out, because they would have the 20 indoor seats if you could give them an administrative approval for 4 outdoor seats. In addition to that it better not to complicate this use permit. So the other issue, I think, is the sign. So I'm looking for suggestions on how we can frame that to make it acceptable to the majority of the commission.
Can we ask a question of the applicant about the sign?
If you would step forward, please.
So who is the sign vendor that you're working with?
It's Davidson Co. That's used widely with Ross.
Michael Ross suggested him. Davidson and Co. I believe they're out of Marin.
So
we did try and use local purveyors, but they wouldn't have us. They're too busy.
So it's a professional,
yes,
experienced Michael Ross recommended sign designer. I'm kind of thinking that we just need to give them the flexibility to allow the professionals to do the work.
I would go along with that.
Well, what I'd like to suggest is, because, as I say, if this were my project, I'd be cutting out some cardboard letters and painting them black and seeing what it looks like up there against the windows.
I don't need a permit to get up on that roof.
Well, you get my point. You know, there's a way of actually eliminating the guesswork here.
Sure.
And actually getting a sense of how it's going to work. And given your investment in this project, I think a little bit of cardboard and an X-Acto knife might be worth it. That said, I think that we could approve language saying that we're approving the sign proposal and allowing flexibility in color, in the use of neutral colors in addition to black, which to me means grays, whites, we're talking about other than garish pink, and it's something, completely, lemon yellow. But although lemon yellow might be perfect, I'm just thinking that if we give them some flexibility in color choice once they've actually, begun to work with this signage, and limit it, as I say, to language like neutral colors, so that if something crazy gets chosen, there's recourse. Maybe that is enough flexibility to let them, come up with signage that works.
I would support that, and I also think in our downtown design guidelines, we have a color palette now, right, Wendy? Oh, we don't?
It's just recommended.
But doesn't specify, I mean, as long as it was in that.
The Benjamin Moore.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a historic, right, which is a lot of colors. I don't think they're going to end up.
We wouldn't want to go too far off brand anyway.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody I think the suggestion is good if they're limited to a sign that is no larger than what's proposed, and they can have the flexibility to adjust it somewhat and adjust the colors somewhat. If we can craft a motion that way, I think most people would be satisfied up here to go with it. So if anybody wants to attempt that.
Well, I think that in terms of flexibility, they have submitted a certain square footage that falls well within the allowable square footage when you consider also pan glass. So either we simply say work within the applied square footage, plus or minus whatever, if we want to give them a little leeway, but certainly the idea of staying with what the suggested colors are for the historic downtown plaza makes sense.
And maybe not larger than the font size or the letter. I mean, if you want to go smaller, that's fine.
We would consider going smaller. As you've made some great suggestions. Thank you, Mr. Barnett, about visibility, about dimensional issues, and we're going to revisit that. We would never consider going bigger. Right. You ask for the earth, and you then do what you're told, and I'm happy to abide by whatever is decided. And looser language on some of the things that we've touched on would help me a lot. So thank you.
I think we've got pretty much consensus up here, so I'd like to see a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve, let's see. Sorry. I recommend that we make a motion to approve a use permit for a restaurant, and also the sign review for a restaurant, and also the design review for the restaurant as related to facade modifications, with the modifications to conditions as number 1 as established by staff for the license required for the restaurant, which is number 41, and 2, that we make specific language modifications for hours of operation, that the use permit runs 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., and with the modifications to a language that provides flexibility for the sign, establishing the maximum square footage of the sign, but allowing flexibility in terms of the size of the letters, and also the color palette of the letters that are compatible with recommended colors established under the design review guidelines for the city and the historic district.
Wow.
Is any one of those a second?
I used to be a city planner.
I'll second it with a question. Do we also have to, in this motion, approve the findings? Or are there findings associated with it?
Yes, and the associated findings with the project, as well as the resolution as set forth by staff.
And I'll accept that as a second.
Any further discussion? Could I have a roll call vote, please?
Oh, someone needs to turn off the mic. Commissioner Kelso Barnett.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill.
Yes.
Commissioner Wellender.
Yes.
Commissioner Bohar.
Yes.
Commissioner McDonald.
Yes.
Commissioner Larry Barnett.
Aye.
Chair Felder.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
7-0. Congratulations. So good luck, and let's get this restaurant going. That'll conclude our public hearing then. I believe we have no items for discussion. Are there any issues updates?
Hi, Commissioners, David here. I didn't fall asleep, I promise. But yeah, I just want to remind you all of the City Council meeting on Monday evening, special City Council meeting where we'll be talking about the general plan, development code, and urban growth boundaries. On the 5th of August, the City Council will be having a housing town hall recap. So I'm sure you'd be interested in that. You may all know that have seen that we've canceled the August the 8th meeting. And if when you can give me an update as to whether we've been able to schedule a meeting for August 22nd. You may recall, commissioners, that we've been trying to talk to you about setting one up for the 3-batch project.
Yeah, David, we didn't have a quorum for that meeting.
We do have a quorum. Okay, thank you. So
We do not.
Oh, we do not. Okay, great. I will let the applicant know, and then we'll return and perhaps even do that on the 12th of September. And I do want to remind you that on the 12th of September, that will be the evening that we consider, assuming that we get the applications in, the 3 commercial sites for the Verizon project. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you, David. Comments from the commission? Seeing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We
Thank
are
you very
adjourned.
much, commissioners. Thank you.
Okay, David, I'm hanging up. Uh-huh. Yes? Thank you. Would like to what?
I love it. Thank you.
Powder? Oh, okay, great. I will take tomorrow off.
I think we gave you the flexibility.